Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining the second session of the Connecting Women in Technology conference. And this is all about tech for good. So really welcome to everyone, and thanks for joining. Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about how you can get involved with Tech for Good programs and some of the initiatives that we've been involved in here at IBM that are open to everyone to help solve some of the world's societal issues. But also, more importantly, I'm going to be introducing later in this session a team of people who've built something truly amazing, actually, as one of our Call for Code challenges late last year that helps tackle racial justice online. So they're going to be talking you through the technology that was involved in that particular solution as part of this challenge. But first then, I'm going to be talking a little bit about Call for Code, which is our sort of annual Tech for Good challenge that we've been running for the last 4 years. So I'm just going to share my screen now, and I hope you can see that. So today, as I say, we're going to be explaining how technology and developers can help find solutions to help build Tech for Good solutions, and talk about our Call for Code challenge. So Call for Code is a sort of a campaign challenge that we've been running since 2018, and over those years, we've had an astonishing amount of developers and technologists that have come forward and participated in our annual challenges and our spot challenges as well. So over 400,000 participants have taken part in these challenges, which includes 72,000 students from over 170 nations. And we started this out in 2018 as a kind of like an experiment, really, of the theory that developers really have fantastic ideas about how to tackle really important issues. And our first challenge was around natural disasters in 2018 and looked to build a solution to help prepare communities when natural disasters hit. We kind of then, over the last few years, introduced other challenges as well. And last year, introduced some spot challenges around COVID-19, racial justice, and also wildfires as well. So how technologies can be used to do that, and running these challenge competitions. And then this year, 2021, we have our current climate change challenge, which I'll tell you a little bit more as we run through this deck. So why is Call for Code kind of an important thing to take part in? So really what we were aiming to do is help you build your skills. So during the challenge, you'll learn lots about hybrid cloud technologies and also develop your skills around open source technologies and really enhance your sort of professional career, being part of something that perhaps you've never done before. But those solutions are also about fighting back against the most pressing humanitarian societal issues. So using your skills to actually do something really great. Also, the Call for Code challenge is all about being part of a community as well. So if you have a great idea about how to tackle zero hunger, but really don't have anyone you can work with in a team, being part of the Call for Code community can help you connect to others to help make that idea become a reality. And finally, the Call for Code challenge was never designed as just a hackathon. It was always a chance to be able to build a solution around a great idea, but also gain the support in order to turn that idea into a reality. So we have partnerships with the Linux Foundation, and also with there is also a $200,000 package to help make that solution a real thing, and the support of the IBM Service Corps to take that solution and take it into the field and make it a reality. So That's all what Call for Code is, kind of a great sort of annual competition that we run. So here's some examples then of the sorts of solutions that have come out and been successful and now out in the field. So as an example, last year we've had Liquid Prep, which is an IoT solution which helps small farmers understand how much water that they're using. We've also had Cluster Duck, which is a mobile mesh network which can be accessed by people to help them stay in touch when communications lines might go down if there's, say, a hurricane, and that was really used in Puerto Rico to be able to sort of help them prepare for when hurricanes hit the island. And last year I was personally involved in Quireless, which was a kind of inspired by the COVID-19 pandemic, which kept musicians and choirs apart. And you know, I sing in a choir as well, so I was very interested in this particular solution. But I had a fantastic team of people that got together and built a web-based platform that allows choirs and musicians to work together and create an instant rendition of a video which syncs up the music, the sound and the vision together, and gives them a sort of a great little video piece which syncs all that sound up, which is impossible if you're trying to do that on Zoom. If you've ever tried to do music on Zoom, it's impossible. So Quireless was a great project, and I was really happy to be involved in that particular project. And on all of these projects, it's really important that they're all built on open source technologies, and all of the code for those projects is shareable and can all be found on the Call for Code websites. So for this year then, so how could you get involved in doing some tech for good this year? So our challenge this year opened in March. As I say, it's all about climate change this time. Submissions are taking place now, and the deadline to submit your idea is July the 31st. And in November, we'll be announcing the winner of the $200,000 prize and all of the package of support to help make that solution a real thing. So the focus for this year's Call for Code challenge competition is all around climate change, like I said. And those three themes around climate change are clean water and sanitation, around zero hunger, and the responsible production and green consumption. Now on this page here, I've sort of shared a couple of links. We've got some brilliant starter kits, which I can show you in a moment, that are on our Call for Code website, which talk you through sample applications, some ideas around how you might be able to use the technology, and points you through to all of the resources that you might need to build a solution of your own. And then also on Crowdcast, which is the channel that you've joined this event on Crowdcast, there is lots of events that are happening on the channel to help you build your skills, to be able to connect with others, and also learn from some of our developers within IBM, but also other developers from outside of IBM, of the things that they have done to help inspire you and give you the skills to be able to build something really amazing in time for the July 31st deadline. So I have great pleasure in introducing now onto Crowdcast the team that were responsible for TakeTwo, which is part of our challenge. Can you everyone hear me? Sorry.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, brilliant. Sorry, I got a message there. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. It's nice to see you all chatting on the line there. That's great. So I got a little bit panicked there. I saw a message that no one could hear me. So that's great. So yeah, I've great pleasure in introducing you to the team that were responsible for TakeTwo, which was part of our Spot Challenge for racial justice. And the team are all got their cameras hidden now, and I'm going to introduce you to them. So do you want to switch your cameras on, everybody? Marvelous, good. That's lovely to see you all. So I'm going to hand you over to our audience and you can talk a little bit about what you built, what amazing thing that you built. We do have another member of the team that is in the audience. I'm going to invite Anna back onto the screen when we've got things going for her section. But at the moment, I'm going to hand you over to Ian.
Yeah, thanks very much. So we'll just wait for the slides to come up and then I will make a start. There we go. So thanks everyone for joining. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us today to learn about our solution and also, most importantly, to learn about how you can contribute. That's really what the purpose of today is. We'd love to have additional people get involved with the project in any way that you can. I'm the offering manager for the TakeTwo team, and I'm going to start off by just giving you an overview of what you're going to hear today. You're going to hear from 5 of us. I'm going to start off by talking through the problem statement that started us on this journey, and then Nagma is going to talk through about how that problem manifests in society and introduce you to ideas about how we like to solve those problems. Joe's going to give you an overview of the solution architecture and give a brief demo of how the solution works. Naoki, our AI expert, he's going to talk through the AI model that underpins the solution and talk about the future evolution of that AI model, the vision that we have for it. And then Anna's going to talk through possible future implications and the possible use cases of the solution as it evolves over time. We've started very narrow because this is a call for code project, but we do envisage this growing significantly over time in a variety of different industries. So looking at the problem statement, the focus of our team has been on the fact that racial bias is learned and perpetuated in different ways, and these are things through things like societal beliefs, misrepresentation, or ignorance, and this consequently creates inequitable outcomes across all spheres of life. Because this was a call for code project, we looked at this problem through the lens of text-based media. So quite narrow to start with. But within text-based media, we regularly find examples of both overt racism, things like racial slurs, or text in technology that we know we need to eradicate, like master and slave. But in that text-based media, we also find more subtle forms of racism. And these are things like news headlines or the reporting of crime statistics. And the intention of this solution is to deal with both the more obvious and also the more subtle forms of racism and really educate people as to why the language they're using can be biased in nature. We feel that the prolific use of social media in particular is a problem. It's wide-reaching, published content, and it's very easy for racial bias to be perpetuated very quickly, and we think unwittingly at times as well, and hence why this focus on education. So I'll hand over to Nagma now, who's going to talk us through some examples of how this manifests in society.
Hi, everyone. So nice to be here today. And I just wanted to start off by talking through this quote that you see up on the screen. Words shape our worldview, how we regard others, and how we make others feel. And I really love this statement by our very own Dale Davis Jones and Tim Humphrey. I think it really gets across the point that language is an instrumental tool in shaping the world that we really live in. It affects how we show up in the world and how we're treating each other. And so with the murder of George Floyd, there was a lot of scrutiny around what was being said, how it was being said. And what we all noticed was that there was a lot of different people on social media, just around the web, sharing the wealth of knowledge on the background of when they were seeing certain stereotypes being perpetuated on posts. And, you know, this was coming from that people were really sharing a lot of different examples of offensive and hurtful posts on social media without them even realizing that it was offensive and it was hurtful. And so on the other side, there was people, coming from an educational lens, trying to show people, this is why this is really hurtful, and this is why this has some racist implications, and this is where this is coming from. In addition to that, we noticed that there was a lot of different news articles that were actually perpetuating stereotypes in the way that they were written and in the way that that certain language was being used within describing different demographics of people. And ultimately, if you think about it, we're all exposed to so much media, news, fake news, and these different biases, so much content on an hourly basis. And it's really inherent in everything that we read. And, this can really lead to the perpetuation of hurtful ideas and biases. And so we, as a team, we talked about how we were often humbled by those who were sharing the background and the education around, why certain words and phrases consisted of racial bias, or how when it was used in this way, that there could be some hurtful implications. And at a personal level, we saw a need to be educated ourselves and really bring awareness to the question of our own biases in the content that we've either created or consumed. And so we all came together because we saw an opportunity to address this bias detection within the media and, again, educate people in the process. And so you can see that all the headlines on the right, they share the significance and need for something like TakeTwo. For example, some of you may be aware of the movement different tech companies were taking to have that serious look at what are the terms that we're using within our different forms of content code that may consist of racist implication. What about our projects? Is the language that we're using really reflective of how we want to be saying things? And are we aware of what might be hurtful and what might consist of racist implications or consist of biased stereotypes? And there was definitely also a closer look at how the content on social media perpetuates racist stereotypes without people even being aware of it. And the influence that the media has isn't really new, but it's just so important to understand the background of the words and phrases that we choose to say and that we continue to say as well. And as in many problems, awareness is really the key. And so we believe that bringing awareness to when the use of language is racially biased and why could really help in mitigating content that is created from just people not being aware of what it means to say that. And therefore that could minimize the bias that is perpetuated through different forms of content and ultimately really reduce the offensive and hurtful content that's out there. And so this is where our solution comes in, TakeTwo. So we initially began with the idea to build a tool that would detect bias in content. And in order to do this, we needed a data set that would help us with, consisting of racially biased terms and expressions. And we quickly realized that there was really no publicly available data set on this. And, this made sense because language is incredibly subjective. And while it is more straightforward to identify overt forms of racial bias, it's a lot harder to capture the subtle forms. So this is where we saw our Chrome extension, our browser extension coming into play. We wanted to see if there was a way to potentially crowdsource this data. In this way, we're able to provide trusted community members who have a good understanding of what racial bias looks like in content to be able to flag content and provide an explanation as to why. And this would feed into our machine learning model, which Naoki will go into further detail. But this will ultimately serve as the data to check against for our solution, the API that would flag when there was racially biased content in creation. Just to be clear, we completely understand that this is an extremely complicated task, and there's a lot of dependencies on what is the context in which these terms and phrases are being used. You know, there's not really a ground truth to check against, and you know, there's a lot of different things that we have to think through and are continuing to think through. But we really do think that we have a really good starting point in getting us to where we'd like to be. And we designed this entire experience to be private. Our goal is to educate and really empower people using TakeTwo to understand the implications of what they're saying. We wanted to provide people within the Black community and to share when certain content was offensive to them and why, and provide that context and background as well. And so this is just an overview of our solution, but Johanna will take you through what our solution architecture is and a little bit more detail on that.
Thanks, Nagla. So hi, I'm Jo. I'm working as a developer on TakeTwo. It's been like a really rewarding project, so I definitely encourage people to get involved in either this project or any other Call for Code project. So as Nagma said, we started with the idea that we wanted to build this client tool, which you can see on the right-hand side of the screen at the bottom, which would be a private experience where someone who's creating content can check what they've written for any racial bias that might be present. So kind of like how you check your grammar with Grammarly, but this would be checking for any areas that you might want to reconsider rewriting because they could cause harm or offense, and maybe educate someone as to why, so that they can learn as part of that process. But like Nagma said, what we realized really early on is that there is no data set for subtle racial bias. There are data sets for racial slurs or quite overt racial sort of racially biased language. But when it comes to more subtle things, there's some data on Twitter that you can scrape, but there isn't a ground truth. And so what we decided very early on is we wanted to, as part of our project, kind of support a system that could hold that ground truth. So a data set that could be even used outside of TakeTwo for research or for other people who have a project in mind that involves racially biased language. So what we did is we decided to start with, okay, well, what's the easiest way to get the data? So on the left, the TakeTwo marker is basically a Chrome extension that someone can install in their browser. At the moment, it's just Chrome, but in the future, we hope it'll be available on other browsers. Someone can download the extension, and while they're browsing online media, I'll actually show you. I'll show you in a minute, actually, sorry, because I need to share my screen. So while they're browsing online media, they can highlight bits of text or words that they feel might contain racial bias, and they can submit them to the TakeTwo database. They can also, the tool is quite flexible. It allows them to select. We predefined some categories of racial bias. So we defined, I think, around 6 categories of racial bias that we felt were appropriate. But these are things that we're sort of working with the community to understand if they're the right categories to have. But basically we had a category list, so someone can highlight some text and then decide which category of racial bias they feel it belongs to, and also give an explanation of why they feel that that is racially biased. This data is then used by the machine learning part of the project, which Naoki is going to talk about later. And in the middle sits an API, and this API is responsible for taking the data that is crowdsourced and putting it in the database, but also it serves the data science model to the client tool, where someone can actually check text that they're about to publish online before they actually publish it. I'm going to share my screen. Is that okay, Nagma? And then I'm just going to run through how the GitHub repos are all sort of set up together. Okay. Nagma, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Cool. Okay, so the high level repo in GitHub is just TakeTwo, and this repo gives an overview of the problem statement which Ian talked about. There's a video about the solution if you want to find out a bit more, and then it goes into how it works. And there are 3 other repos, and we purposely wanted to keep each component separately because we felt that they standalone could be used by other projects for different reasons. For example, someone might want to crowdsource different types of text that's not related to racial bias, and we thought that that should be allowed. Or someone might want to do some modeling on racially biased language, and we wanted that to be possible without needing to have all the components of the project. So there's 3 parts. There's the API, which is built using Python and Fast API. There's the data science part of the project, which Naoki will go through, and then there's a Chrome extension, which is built mainly using JavaScript. So the Chrome extension itself, basically the user installs it into their browser, and we've allowed for the possibility for them to need to log in with a username and password. At the moment, so when we first started, we felt that this should be open to anyone. Lately, we've been discussing the possibility of anyone being able to crowdsource, but perhaps we have authenticated users who are kind of subject matter experts who can verify some of the data that's being put into the database. Once you have this installed and you've logged in, or if it's just open, the user will basically be able to highlight pieces of text. So if they're on a web page like this, they can highlight words or entire phrases, and they can select from one of the categories we've defined, and these categories are open to change. So we welcome comments from the community to tell us if they feel that these are appropriate or not. So for example, here someone's highlighted a word and they've selected this pink category. The user can also delete just by clicking on the trash can icon. And they can remove all of their contributions if they want. And these will actually be removed from the database as well. So any change that's made here, so if you highlight, it will be added to the data set. If you delete it, it will be immediately removed as well. This all gets wrapped up in an API. So this is the API endpoints that we've defined. So we have, so for example, this one gets all the data that's been put into the database along with the categories that have been defined. We collect for every post that gets put in via this post mark. We collect the word or phrase that they have highlighted. We collect the URL from where it came, because we want to start looking at things like, can we look at where the news source, so if it's a news article, the news source, and is there a correlation between news source and whether or not something is racially biased, and wrap that up in our machine learning work. We also collect so we want, I don't know if we do now, but we want to collect the date, because what is classed as racial bias evolves over time. You can delete, we can change. The categories are built into the API, so the Chrome extension actually gets served the categories via the API, and this analyze endpoint is actually used by the text editor, which is our client tool. And at the moment, this is just a text editor, so it's basically like this. Someone can come in and type a sentence, and any bits of that, this is just an example, obviously, any parts of it that it feels that the machine learning model has determined might contain racially biased language, it will highlight and it will give an explanation. It will give an explanation of the category that it feels it falls into, and also additional info. And we've talked about it could also give examples of alternative words or phrases to use instead. Like Nagma said, all of these components are meant to be private experience. So when people crowdsource data to our database, their experience is private. They're privately adding something to the database. We do collect a user ID, which is anonymous, so that we can understand kind of credibility of the people that are crowdsourcing for us. The text editor itself is also completely private, so it's just meant to educate, and then someone can still publish their text-based content if they feel that they don't want to take on board what the tool has advised, and that's okay. We've also so one other thing that I wanted to mention is obviously on our radar is kind of bad actors, people putting in data that might not be trustworthy, or putting in personal information, things like that. So for personal information and things like that, we have kind of mechanisms to get to verify that this data has actually come from a valid web page. For verifying data that's been put in the database, we've started to sort of mock up some ideas where we will serve words back to the users that are crowdsourcing and ask them to kind of verify. And this all works kind of in the same way that something like Google Translate works to verify some of that translation data that they have. But this is something that we haven't actually built in yet. So this is somewhere where we definitely want some help to implement this work. I want to stop sharing. Nagma, can you take the screen back? Oh, there we go. Yeah. So I'm going to hand over to Naoki now. I think Nagma's linked all of the GitHub repos in the chat. And Naoki's going to talk about the machine learning work that we've been working on. Thanks.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, my name is Naoki, and I've been working on the machine learning component of the solution. I'm a machine learning researcher myself, and I'm going to say a few words about the machine learning component that exists, and also the future vision that we have, where we do need a lot more help. And so, we would love to have some of you join in and contribute to this aspect. So this chart is showing sort of a roadmap that we envision of where we are in the machine learning component and where we want to go in the future. So the one of them that's on the left of the bar there has been implemented in the repo, but a couple of them to the right, they are actually envisioned but not been implemented. And so one point that I'd like to emphasize is that the reason why we want to employ machine learning based is that based on the crowdsourced data, you want to be able to learn more sort of implicit and subtle forms of racial bias and expressions, right? So in the progression, we named as the version 0, the bias term model, where it's the basic model where you have a dictionary of bad terms, racially biased terms, and then you can look up that dictionary and make judgment. This is certainly okay, and it's effective to some extent, and in particular, it won't. Well, it can do its job to some extent, but it just cannot detect more subtle forms of biased expression. So we want to go further than that, and for that, the use of crowdsourced data that Johanna, described, the tools for collecting, would be very important. So let me describe this first version, MLV1, or the contextual bias expression learning model that we have implemented in the repo. And this thing learns to detect racially biased expressions in some broad context. So the square block on the left is sort of pictorially depicting this method. And on the left is the training portion, where you use the data coming from crowdsourcing to train a model, machine learning model. And on the right in the box is applying that model to a new sentence or paragraph to make the judgment of bias versus unbiased. So in the training there, you may have examples like using master-slave architecture labeled as biased, but authored by master inventor, maybe labeled unbiased. So you can see, for example, even the word master, can be viewed as biased or unbiased, depending on the context of its usage. So these sentences that come in as part of the training data are transformed into what's called a bag of words representations, and they are numerical vectors. And so this transforms these sentences into kind of a numerical vector space where you can apply machine learning classification methods such as naive-Bayes or support vector machine. Those are implemented in the repo. That learns a general machine learned classifier. And they can be applied to some unseen new sentences that come in, like, for example, it is a master replica on the right. And the classifier is applied to make a judgment on any arbitrary sentence, biased versus unbiased. So this is sort of the basic model that is in the repo. But as it says at the bottom of the slide, this is sort of a first in the series of possible ML components of varying degrees of sophistication. And we are recommending these future steps, two of which are mentioned here. The next one we call MLV2, or the sequential context model, would leverage the cutting edge deep learning kind of technology, like recurrent neural networks, so that this context that you consider into your bias expression judgment will be more refined and sequentially aware and so forth. So it will sort of rise up to the more full NLP, natural language processing kind of capability. Another one that we envisioned, which we call Ensemble consensus learning, or ML version 4, that is sort of designed to learn to address the concern that some of the data might be unreliable, or some of the markers that make use of the Chrome extension to give labeled data may be unreliable. And so we would like a machine learning model that actually can learn the credibility of these markers and learn from the more credible markers. So this is sort of in addition to the authentication kind of mechanism that Johanna talked about, to guard against some poor or corrupted or even possibly adversarial kind of data and markers. So if you can go to the next slide, I'd like to say a few words about this ensemble consensus learning concept. We have thought of it as sort of a concrete algorithm approach to try to do this, based on loosely based on something called ensemble learning, where you have many machine learning models and algorithms, and you combine by sort of taking average, and in general, it can improve the accuracy of the overall machine learning mechanism. But here, we applied it in a sort of a unique way, where you train the same machine learning algorithm on many copies of the training data, where those copies are created by choosing different subsets of the markers. And then you train this kind of ensemble learning on top of them. And the way this works is that you can actually learn to zoom into the best subsets, given these many subsets. So in that process, it can actually weed out those markers that tend to give bad judgment, and so you can over time learn to become more credible by sort of reading out the less reliable ones and then zooming into the more credible ones. And one subtle point is that because you don't really have the ground truth, but you're relying on the collective, with the information that's coming from the crowdsourcing, you have to make the judgment of who is good and who is bad, or who's reliable and who's more unreliable, by comparing it to the current average or the consensus of the crowd. So you sort of, that's why it's called consensus learning. You're learning to zoom into those markers that are not contradicting with many others. So assuming that the overall crowd is reasonable, then there's some theoretical manner in which you can sort of guarantee that this mechanism will work well and quickly learn to focus onto the more credible markets. Anyway, so let me stop here, and if you have any questions about machine learning aspects, please, I'll be happy to answer in the chat or whatever. So back to Nagma. Or to Anna, sorry.
Hi, so my name is Anna, and I'm really excited about the TakeTwo. I think there's a lot of room here to get involved in an application that will hopefully have a wide reach. But some of the current use cases and applications that we see for the for TakeTwo is social media platforms, blogs, code reviews, articles, and that can extend in the future, hopefully from personal use to more organizational use, such as in education or corporate companies, possibly. And then future applications would be having other languages, because right now it's English, and to expand it into the gaming industry. And we're also working with some partnership to be able to expand further. And those under discussion right now are with Carnegie Mellon University, Biasly AI with the Mila Institute, and inclusive naming. What's really great about the application is that we're still in the early stages. So there's a lot of use cases that will come out of this as the application grows and expands. And so this is where we really need assistance or help from everyone who may be interested. We're looking for any help from designers, data scientists, developers, nonprofits, academia, but really just there are so many ways you can contribute. And as the application gets more robust and expands, then the opportunities will also expand. And as my colleagues have said, I mean, this is a really good, it's a really good place to get involved so that, again, we can hopefully reach more people, we can have more applications, we can really make this tool grow. And there's a lot of opportunity here. And as Nagma placed all the links in the chat, that's where you can get started. Nagma, next slide. Sorry. Right. And so this is just a list of all of the links that we have. The main one is our GitHub repository, and then we have the separate one for API, and then TakeTwo data science, and the Chrome extension, pretty much what Joe had mentioned previously when she did her presentation. But yeah, I mean, this is our Slack channel and tutorial. Please take a look at the tutorial. Please join the Slack channel. There's a lot of room for opportunity to get involved. So we really hope you take the opportunity to just look into it, research it. If you have any questions, of course, let us know. The Slack channel is a great way to communicate. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and we really hope that you can join us in our journey. And like the team has mentioned, we think we've gotten to a really good place, and we'd love to have you all join us. And there's so many opportunities to get involved. And if you have any questions about our project, please put them in the chat, or yeah, we'd be happy to connect to discuss more about our solution. And thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Team TakeTwo, for talking us through your excellent solution, which I hope will help improve online sort of racial justice and supporting that real great cause. And it was a great pleasure to have you as part of our Connecting Women in Tech live conference on the IBM session. So thank you very much. Like the team says, this is actually a call for you to take part. It really is, and that's what the session is all about. Take part if you were interested in contributing towards the TakeTwo solution via some of the links that the team have put onto the chat there, or if you're more interested in creating a tech for good solution around climate change and wanted to take part in this year's challenge, then some of the links that I put in earlier and joining up and being part of the Call for Code community is another thing that you could try. So at the screen there, you can see a sort of a flashing green button, join the Call for Code. If you wanted to be part of that community, and sign up for that, and sort of be notified of the sort of deadlines, be included in or take part in some of the educational sessions, or even the hackathon. I did ask a question via the poll function on the event here, if anybody would be interested in joining a hackathon for the UK, which we're considering running before the deadline at the end of July. So if you're interested in joining that, or you can follow us on the Crowdcast channel here. There's lots of really interesting sessions happening from our developers, helping you prepare your climate change solution. So thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to close the session in a minute unless anybody else has a question for the team. Also in the chat here, I'm just going to put a link to the next open session for Connecting Women Live conference. The next tech talk is on understanding 5G with Intel, which is tomorrow afternoon. If you are interested to join that session, 11 a.m. tomorrow. If you wanted to join that session, then that's the link directly to that event. But otherwise, I'm going to wish you a fantastic sunny afternoon here in the UK or wherever you are. And this event will be available on replay if you want to share it with any of your colleagues. Again, thank you very much for joining, and to the team for all of your work to make the event success. Thank you very much.